Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Tabletop. I am back with my good friend, Captain Spud.
Hi, Ash.
Hi, and I have got you in today to talk a little bit about something that kind of came up in the last Inside Tabletop with Owen and was on both of our minds because we were talking about competitive play in general, like in tabletop wargaming. And we then got to talking about competitive painting.
Yeah.
And neither him nor I have some experience in competitive painting, and a lot of my friends are competitive painters. And I do have a few Golden Demons back here that I won back when a guy like me could win a Golden Demon, which is
I recently,
pre-internet.
recently watched a historical walkthrough of year after year of the Golden Demons, and wow, what a difference.
There is
those first handful of years.
There is a sharp incline in the quality of painting.
Yeah.
I come from a time in miniature painting where I thought I invented dry brushing.
Yeah.
I was like, there was no one to teach me. And I saw somebody teaching dry brushing in a Games Workshop store when I was like 10 or 11 and was like, that's my thing. I came up with that. It's overpainting. I invented that. I was like, so offended that someone was teaching dry brushing and that was like my style and they'd stolen my style. So and this came up because, and we should start a timer because it's 30 minutes on. If you guys don't know the rules of Inside Tabletop, we spend 30 minutes talking about a topic. Otherwise we'll talk forever. Talk about competition painting because you love the hobby side of tabletop wargaming. You have a website dedicated to it. Captain Spud is amazing.
The website exists.
It was updated in 2021, which
it's
is to
fine.
say it was updated post-pandemic, so I'm allowing this to still be a website.
Yeah, okay, great.
But you have and if you haven't seen some of the pictures of what Spud's made, every year at Adepticon, he does a grand display. Last year was the Misery Engine, which was a Bakunin army that you beautifully sculpted with like Hadouken throwing tags. Yeah. The year before that was the A-Team bobblehead. Like you did like your beautiful
an entire scratch sculpted chibi foreign company army.
Yeah, foreign company army for Infinity, like with the van. You did the A-Team.
We have to do the van. I have no nostalgia for this property, but even I know you need to have the van.
I have. The thing is, it worked on me. And so we started talking about in the last episode of this kind of what constitutes competitive painting. And you wanted to talk a bit about it too, because you've had a bunch of different experiences. And this is not to drag anybody or create a controversy here. It's more to talk about like what experiences can be like inside competitive painting as a contest and like what is it for? Yeah. And you wrote a manifesto.
I did, I was just going to come on and just have general conversations with Ash, and then I watched the competitive thing yesterday, and I was like, hey, we could do the whole thing on the other side of this. It's great. And then I wrote up a 3.5 page manifesto.
Should we link it? Can we link the Google Doc? Are you comfortable with that?
I don't think there's anything
you didn't name any names
in it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say better not.
Okay,
better not. It's fine. I'm essentially going to go through it.
Maybe we'll come up with a curated version.
Yeah, maybe. I'll come up. But anyway, okay. So just a big disclaimer that when I'm saying like competitive painting, I am not like a Golden Demon or Crystal Brush competitor or Sword and Brush. Like I'm not talking about like I don't do like the fine artisanal spend 5 months on my models. I just mean like I aim for go to a big tournament that is going to have a paint judging thing, and I want my army to win. Like that's the level. I'm like mid tier, right? Like I'm not doing.
Well, I think that's important to talk about because those competitions exist underneath the prestige ones, and I think they're equally valid. And you got some notes in here about why they're important for a community and like the community building stuff, but. I think that's important to disclaim. Like that's where you sit. You sit in that mid tier. Of like,
and I'm happy and comfy and just thrilled to be there in the middle. I want to make a cool army, show up for an event, go through the motions of playing the rounds of the event, and then at the end, someone hopefully tells me I'm pretty and gives me something from a little piece of metal from a trophy store.
It's more the spectacle stuff than it is the like fine technique stuff.
And it's an excuse to push to larger. I want to paint my armies anyway, but having the existence of things, and we will talk about this, it pushes me to do larger and more expansive things than I would have done in the absence of these types of competitions. So just that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about painting. And also we're going to use painting as a shorthand for painting and all the modeling and the sculpting, the hobby side of playing miniature war games. But paint is just easier to say. Okay. So, all right. So I guess I'll start on page 1 of the manifesto. Okay. So basically, I just wanted to start with what was the inciting incident? What was the thing that happened that made me start going on a week and a half of having a lot of deep thoughts about this topic? Well, essentially, okay. So every year, as Ash said, I make Adepticon is like my one big event, has been for the last few years.
Yep.
I'm not a person who goes to a lot of events. So just all I can take is one a year.
You come to like the weekend ITSs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll do little events,
like
but
cons.
this is the big convention that I travel to with like large attendance. And so every year I make a custom army, and generally speaking, I don't win. Like I didn't win last year. I think I won like the first year I went, I think, or maybe the second year for the teams. But then in general, I show up, I get a lot of positive comments, but I'm usually not the person who goes away with the thing. So this year I went down, I worked definitely harder on my entry this year than I ever have before. I worked for 6 months on this army, the army and the display. And that included 7 weeks off work, because historically I don't take my vacation days. So I had...
You're that guy. The manager's like, you have 12 days in lieu. I need you to take time.
I had 75 vacation days in my bank. And then the HR finally realized that sending me an email every year to yell at me was not having any impact. So they called a meeting with my boss and my boss's boss. And they're like, you need to make... And so
man's a problem.
Yeah, they're like, this is an issue. So they made me do that. And I have spent this year trying to burn the bank. Anyway, so I spent all that. So a lot of time put into the project, a lot of like I cared about it. I liked the idea that I had come up with, and I cared a lot about implementing it well. And I was doing all kinds of stuff in this project I'd never done before. Really big project, worked very hard on it. And obviously the goal is I want to show up and I want to be like, here's my thing. And then I want someone to say like, here, you did it. You win. Here's your thing. Didn't happen. I am sad. I am the expected amount of sad that I didn't win. Okay. And this is also included in the disclaimers before we go into the manifesto. I am sad that I didn't win, and that is a factor that influenced me having all the rest of the thoughts that I had about this. But I'm not like mad that I didn't win. Not winning is an expected part, and a lot of the time, not winning is actually a positive motivational factor.
Sure.
Losing last year, I lost last year. I was really sad about it at the time, because honestly, the work wasn't as good as I could have done. But I was insecure about that, and I wanted to win anyway, and wanted to scam my way through on an impressive display board, and size. I didn't, and I was very sad. But then immediately after I lost, like literally the next morning, my friend Scott was, before we even left Adepticon, my friend Scott was snoring and I could not sleep. So at 4 a.m., I went out to the hotel lobby with a pencil and a pen and a pad, and I started sketching, and I sketched the concepts that became this following army. So like losing immediately motivated me to keep doing more work and more impressive work. Right. And that's supposed to be the cycle. This year I lost again, sad, but whatever. But it happened in a different way with some slightly different circumstances that have led me in totally the opposite direction, where I'm actually quite demotivated to do more work on this. Right. And we'll get into that in just a second. So what specifically happened was, so at Adepticon, there's two main events. Technically, Adepticon is more of the painting focused con, and like you have to be fully painted to even attend. Yep. And then I think because of that, every single event of almost any size has something like a painting award, like a little medal or whatever. And so like I got one for the narrative event. The narrative event doesn't even have a painting award, but it has a like random person who made the event fun, and the judge gave it to me because he was like, hey, that person made the event fun because his army was cool. So it became a painting prize. So thanks, Chad.
You got one.
Yeah, it was great. Someone told me I was pretty. That's what I go there for. But there's the two main events that I would say are like the prestige prizes, is the doubles and the singles.
Okay.
And so this year, the person who won the singles was also the person who won the doubles with the same army, and also was the person who won the singles last year with the same broadly army, not the same model for model, but it was red nomads and then red nomads. So the same, umbrella army, and also was the person who won the singles in 2023. So they keep basically giving the prize to the same person. And that to me is, and to take nothing away from the guy, really good painter, and his army looks great. Like not at all saying didn't deserve, like absolutely deserved to walk away with stuff. My question is just, does he deserve to be doing wall to wall? But not even on the deserving side. Is it correct for the judges to be awarding the same prize over and over to the same person? Does that have larger implications? I'm going to argue yes. And so on. And So the end result also too is that once we will get into this a little more, but basically once the judges start to give a very clear pattern like that, where they're awarding the same person over and over, the same army over and over, the same like gimmick, like whatever it happens to be, when you keep giving an award over and over and over to the same thing, you're starting to, whether you intend it or not, to communicate that there is a correct kind of art that they're looking for. And this is the only person doing the correct art, and everybody else is doing wrong art, and needs to stop that and start doing correct art if you want to get prizes. And that isn't a great message to be sending out. And to be clear, I love all the people who run this. They're very nice people. They're very thoughtful people. They really take the job seriously. But I think on this one note, I think they maybe haven't thought about the optics when they start repeatedly giving it to the same person. So, okay. So that was the incident. Obviously, like I said, sad at the time, but whatever. I'm over it at this point. But yeah, it made me then have a week and a half of deep thoughts about paint contests at Army Men events, and thought I would put down 3 pages of Google Docs notes and start going through those.
I'm gonna make one more comment.
Sure.
About the army that won in the singles, because
Sure.
this is the same army that Owen played in the singles that was entirely proxied.
Nearly entirely, yeah.
So except for some conversions.
Yeah.
So I think that stuck out for me when I saw the winner too, as something that was worth kind of noting in my mind as an attendee who was not trying to win at the painting contest and didn't care about it, was that it was weird that an army that wasn't actually representative of the army that was being played was also the winner of best paint. You know,
the judges who are sitting down to paint the judging, in fairness, to have no way to know that.
And
they're not comparing it to
I know. What it means though is that guy could have probably brought the models he needed, because the models he needed weren't out of catalog.
Right.
And had them be either not painted because there's no painting requirement in Infinity, or half painted or not painted to the best visibility yet. Because it takes forever to paint a beautiful army the way that army is painted, right? And that sits as an off note for me now too, where some of that proxying decision that got made that impacted Owen's enjoyment of the playing tournament was definitely done so that he could bring a beautifully painted army.
Presumably, yeah.
Well, I don't know how.
In fairness, I mean, it also.
And this is just me as an outside observer.
Like I said, I'm really trying to stay away from any perception that I'm like knocking the person who won. I have nothing against the guy, and like, sure that is valid, but yeah, really, really nicely painted stuff.
But it means that I think the intent must have the intent to me feels like, as an outside observer of the contest, that he wanted to compete in both areas equally, and it's cognitively dissonant for me, if that makes sense, right? Where it's you have this beautifully painted army so that you can do the best you possibly can in the painting contest, but you also want to play a game so that army now represents something completely different on the tabletop, and it just feels weird. It just feels weird to me, and I don't think it was done maliciously. No. I think it was done with the intent that he could do his best in both categories, which I think is completely fine. But then you take someone who made the effort to completely make a new army from scratch every year,
and was prepared to lose games.
I was prepared to lose games because of it, maybe. And I put those two people next to each other, and the judges have no way of knowing that. Yeah. But again, that's again a like, well, then what are painting contests for? Kind of a question in my head. Sure. So you can get on with your thing, but I wanted to add that in because to me, that's it's relevant information as a spectator from the outside, knowing both of those things. One of them feels off to me. You know what I mean? Like picking one, or like the outcome to me, I go, huh. And it happened to me. It's funny. It happened to us at Colder Than Carbonite too, because the guy that won Best Painted there didn't even enter the miniatures he used in the games. Yeah. So like I played against the guy who won the Best Painted at Colder Than Carbonite. He had proxied for like size 4 Yu-Ching remotes as his baggage bots, but then his army display that got judged wasn't the miniatures from his army list. So it's like, again, it's like and the judges have no way of knowing, but there's kind of a good faith argument here that everyone's kind of presenting everything as accurately as they can. And this is kind of unique to Infinity and knock on, which this situation doesn't happen.
That situation can happen in Infinity because Infinity has a really liberal proxy policy.
And can't happen in other games. So I was just going to point out, it's very interesting where we have this kind of weirdness in painting contests. So you go on now. I've talked too much. Okay. I just wanted to add that information where I'm like, Infinity has this weird, unique situation that can come up where sometimes the armies getting judged in the painting contest aren't even the thing that got played on the table.
Okay. So with that incident, that made me have deep thoughts about painting contests, and from top to bottom, here are the thoughts I've had, and starting with basically, why do we do them? Yeah. So why do we do paint prizes in what is otherwise a like playing games kind of a thing?
Sure.
And I mean, the fundamental reason is just it's nice to look at painted models. There's sort of 2 reasons why painted models are better. One of them is just they're nice. They derive it. We derive aesthetic enjoyment from looking at the painted armies. It's also, there's a gameplay perspective there. It's clearer to see what you're fighting against when there's colors of paint on them. It's harder to infer like what is that model that is a black thing or that is a silver thing. That is just harder to spot the details. That literally, if they just paint it red, it's easier to see, and especially if they're picking out details. So, so there's some gameplay legibility.
And I would say too that there's a like, why are we doing this immersive activity the way we're doing it without an element of hobby participation? You know what I mean? Like, well, it's otherwise you're just playing a video game or you're playing a board game.
Yes, but I'm not necessarily hostile to that.
I'm not either.
So it's like, I'm going to do a very fast tangent, which is that like I also play Magic the Gathering, and a huge part of my engagement with Magic the Gathering is I like to make my own decks, and like it is mind-boggling to me to the prospect that I would go online and take someone else's deck. Making the decks is the fun part to me.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily everyone's experience of the game. A lot of people are like, no, I don't care about making the decks. Like my engagement with the game is just the doing the reps and getting incredibly good at executing on them. And it ultimately, there's different domains within the game, and there's none of them. There's go online and Wikipedia and look up the no true Scotsman argument that like, obviously gaming is about this and it's not about this. And so, right. And ultimately it is known as the no true Scotsman logical fallacy. So I'm not, but it's just like, I don't slander anyone for them, like, not finding one corner of it fun, because like I hate the competitive aspect, and so they're allowed to hate the part I like.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. So we're all doing different things, and there's different ways to like the same thing. Okay. So those are kind of like why it exists in the first place. But so anytime you make any prize, anytime you make a prize exist that you're doing it, or that you see a prize that someone else is offering, that is an attempt to influence human behavior. You're trying to say that I want to see more of blah, and therefore we will get more blah if we offer a prize. And the prize can be anything. It can be money, it can be physical objects, it can be prestige, right?
It can be a shiny little
shiny little hunks of metal from the trophy store. Yep. This is actually, by the way, the nicest design of the metal that I've seen at Adepticon. Yep. The rectangle looks really nice.
It's my favorite one so far.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, any of these things, like it can take whatever form, but when you do that, you're saying, I want to see more of this behavior, so we'll offer a prize, and then more people presumably will opt to engage in that behavior. So with that in mind, if we're trying to influence behavior, the way I see it is there's two kinds of painting prizes that you can offer in the realm of miniature gaming kind of stuff. So there's the kind of painting prize where it's like completion motivation, where these are more things that you would see at like a local event, where the priorities, I want to see fewer naked models. And I want to see, like, for the people who would have put flat colors on it, maybe we get them to shade and highlight. And for the people who would have shaded and highlight, maybe we get them to blend and do whatever, right? Like you're just trying to get more checkboxes checked. And you want your overall community to do more of the painting and to have everyone a better aesthetic experience. So you offer a prize that is motivated to just get more people painted. And then there's a second type of them, which is more the what I'm labeling here as the fine art kind of contest, where you actually are judging the quality of the painting. You're saying that, like, and especially for something like Adepticon, where people being painted is a given because you're not allowed in the building if you don't have painted models.
I played against a bunch of unpainted armies in Adepticon. Just not to rat anybody out, but I played against a bunch of unpainted stuff.
But
not hard and fast.
But that's what the security people with their wands were looking for.
Was that what they were looking for?
Wasn't it? They were looking for
outside foods that could charge me $7 for a rock star.
But yeah, so the second kind is the fine art kind of contest. That's where like not only like we are assuming that people are going to be painted, but we want to have people push the quality of it. When we want people to scrape the ceiling of the artistic achievement you can do on the models. Yeah. And there are different tiers of that you can do. But as I'm going to talk about this, I really want to break it into those two categories. There's painting prizes that can be awarded at a miniatures tournament that are just there to make sure people are painted. And then there's a different class of them that are there to make people paint them as well as they can. And they are different things that have different places. Okay, so for the next couple of parts of this, I need some numbers, and no numbers exist. So I'm going to invent some numbers. Okay. These are basically like when I just go to random casual events, these are sort of like the approximate percentage splits I see of various categories of level of painting. So what I have, and like I said, invented numbers. No one has real numbers for this. And they're going to be different for every venue. This is just me kind of inventing some numbers so I have something to talk about. So I wrote that there's probably about 5% of people who just don't care about painting and don't do it. right? So there's about 5% of people probably at an average casual event who are just silver models or black models, right? Like maybe they'll prime. And then I would say that I would put 60% of people is probably what I would guess is people who do like basic level painting. And basic level painting is still, it's still a continuum. There's still different levels on basic painting, but it's anything from like, okay, I put paint on the models, like I put flat colors on, up to, okay, well, maybe you also did a wash, or you did contrast paints, and then maybe I also did that and then I highlighted, or maybe I did dry brushing. Like it's the application of techniques that I would say anyone can learn is what I would say is basic painting. And I would say that if you between the 5% who just don't engage and the 60% that I would say do basic painting on average, just inventing some numbers, that covers about 2/3 of the people already.
Yeah.
Right. And then I would say that there's another 20% of people who are trying, who are learning the more advanced techniques and actually they're deciding, I'm not just covering my models in paint, I'm actually going to start myself down the road of pushing the level of the minis a little more. Yeah. They start learning a blending technique. They start learning all this other stuff. They're going to, maybe they're trying their hand at freehand. And they're actively kind of like trying to grow their skills. Yeah, they're on the path. They're not there yet. And they do what I would call above average work. But this at a lot of places, this might be like, oh, that's the guy who does the nice models. They're not necessarily like as good as you would get if you travel to a bigger event, but like they are nicer than average, right? And then finally, that leaves us with 15% are what I would say is on average. Those are like 15% of armies are high quality. And high quality armies are ones where I would say you look at the models and you just don't have any specific complaints. When I'm saying high quality, I'm not saying competition quality minis. I'm just saying they're a model where it's like, yeah, that's just, he did it. He did the job. It's nicely blended. It's painted. There's no like obvious brushstrokes all over the place. He doesn't have big muddy glops of wash in them. They're good. And I have no notes.
Tabletop quality is usually the term for that.
So that's going to be my definition of a high quality through the rest of this. It's not necessarily saying people with competition quality stuff. It's just saying that these are the people where there's no specific flaws. They are skilled enough. They've spent the years and spent the years doing it and gone to classes and whatever, and they know the techniques and they're pretty good at executing them. And then there are a tiny number of people who then push even further and become the Jonathan Hoes of the world, and we hate them. But anyway,
don't hate John. He's
a wonderful person.
He's just a prodigy. He's not a wonderful person. He's a prodigy. He can be many things. He's an incredible painter.
Okay, so. And then the next thing, okay, so I've set kind of two definitions here. So I set my definition of completion motivation contests and fine art contests, and then kind of these imagined numbers. And then so with both of those, let's integrate them together. Fine art contests are not appropriate for most types of events. So wait here, I'm just going to read this because I did mathematics. So at an 8-person event, we would expect 2 people with my definition of an above average event. Sure. An above average army, and 1 with a high quality army, right? If you run a fine art contest at a small local event, you are just going to keep giving Steve the medal. If you do this every month, Steve is always going to be the best painter in your group. Yeah. And this is just the Steve Award. Yeah. So it has no purpose. There's no reason to run these at a small enough group because it's just not everything it's not something that everyone can do. And you're never going to expect that most people are really in competition, right? So then we go to, and so I said, this is bad. I wrote that on the manifesto. It's bad. So I picked the number of a 20-person event. I picked that number because that's essentially kind of where we are. That's like Greg's events. They're about 20-person events.
25 people.
And that's like starting to be the inflection point, but I would still argue that that's still too few people to really have a meaningful fine art judging event, a paint quality, like judges look at the models and decide who did the best job. Because again, if we still look at the numbers, at a 20-person event with my imagined percentages, you're going to have 4 people with above average armies and 3 people with high quality armies. And like 3 people is not really an interesting competition as much. Like it's starting to be one, but it's still not there. And like maybe every once in a while, one of the people with the above average but had a cool idea gets to jump up. But it's defensible if you want to do it, but I would still argue you're not having a great competition. There just aren't enough bodies in the room and to hit the critical mass of like high quality stuff to have something like an interesting back and forth. Like who's it going to be? You know, the lower you reduce the number, you know who it's going to be.
Right.
And then finally, if we pick a 50-person event like Adepticon, you have 7 high quality armies using my imagined numbers. And then there we go. So 7 people who are all achieving at a high degree. They have different styles. They're applying different techniques, and they're excellent in different ways. But like 7 excellent contributions, that's an interesting choice to make.
Sure.
Right. And you can make some and so
well, if you apply your same logic within those 7 people, almost would be the same characteristics again.
Yeah.
Like in those 7 people, one of them would not really care if they're going to win or not. They're just paying for themselves. And then like you'd be back to 1 to 2 people at the top who really care, really tried hard. They're the one that's between, and then down from there is the mid ranges and stuff.
Yeah.
You can subdivide those 7 people the same.
Yeah, in a room of 50, you might actually have someone who also dropped a model off a Golden Demon upstairs, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, okay. So, and this is why, so like, so the main takeaway here is just that, in my opinion, I don't think that paint quality necessarily has a great place in smaller events, and therefore larger events really are the only place to have these things. Before we get back to that second part of the point, I'll just finish with it. So most events, and I'm just talking about your local events or like your area's annual bigger event where people travel to it, they should be having more the army completion kind of contest. And I think that those are hugely valuable, but you need to keep that in mind when you're doing them, is that because again, if we're offering a prize, the prize has a reason. There's a type of behavior we're trying to influence, and exactly how you form the prize gives you that outcome. So if you're doing local events, you want a prize that makes people paint their armies. You don't want to have a best painted, because it's always going to Steve. You just want, did people paint their armies?
Yeah.
And so like there's like the type of prize we did locally for that Ash started doing and that I stole from him was I wrote on the manifesto that I invented it, but Ash was like, hey,
hang on a second. That was me.
It was basically, so by the time I don't remember who did what parts of it, but by the time I was done stealing it and refining it, what I started doing was everyone who showed up who was fully painted got 3 blue raffle tickets. Right. And then everyone in the building got, I think I was eventually giving 2 or 3.
It was 2 to 3, and they would give them to the army.
And then you give them to them, and here's the red tickets, and please write someone's name on the red tickets when we do our display at lunch, and vote for someone's army. Yeah. And then we do the raffle pull from the collection of all them, or sometimes we break them into 2 different raffles.
I usually gave a ticket for every round we had, and then in between rounds, or like -1 sometimes, in between rounds you go walk around and you give a ticket to the army that you think looks nice. And that gives people something to do between rounds. Yeah.
And so the combination of those, if we look at what are our incentives that we create with this, is number 1, you get an incentive for just being painted. We're not judging whether you did a fantastic artistic job with it. If you covered your models in paint, you get your raffle tickets and you might get the tchotchke.
It's carrot, not stick.
Exactly. And then we do something like a paint quality judging, but it's not like from a top-down authority figure who's running the thing. It's people are just voting. And like, I was always very specific when I wrote it, like, vote for the army you think is cool by whatever method you want to decide that. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm not questioning how you did it.
It's a little bit the execution by 5 guys. You don't know who did the killing shot. Like, if you spread out the responsibility to the entire crowd, then it's more of a meritocracy based upon a group opinion as opposed to like one person's opinion.
And you get some interesting outcomes from doing that. Like my favorite outcome from the entire time that I ran this prize this way, I did them over a course of a year. And like at every event we drew for a starter box. And then at the end of the year, we did a bigger draw for, I don't even remember what it was at this point. And basically what happened is over the course of the year, I held on to the counts of how many people got which army. I didn't tell anyone I was doing this, but I held on to them and I tallied them at the end of the year, who had gotten the most painting votes. And the conclusion of this one will be meaningful to you because you know both of these people and what their armies look like.
Okay.
The people tied at the end of the year for most votes were Daviette and Tom.
Oh,
those are very different painters.
Very different painters.
Our friend Daviette, he has this beautifully blended red nomad army, and it's spectacular looking, and he's like a really fastidious painter and doing all the details, whatever. My friend Tom goes to Home Depot and he buys a bucket of paint, and then he lays his models out and he tips it over on the models.
That's not entirely accurate as to how he paints. He's a very competent painter.
Okay.
He's a very competent painter.
I have no choice but to believe you. So Tom
Spud's best friend.
Tom was tied at the end of the year for votes. Well, if Tom's a bad painter, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Tom's army that he played that year was his Starco army, where every single model was painted to look like a 90s X-Men cartoon X-Men character. They were not well executed, but every single time he shows up at the army, you see it and you're like, that's so cool.
That's it. Yeah, it's theme.
So we had our painter who was doing the best mechanical job tied with a person who had just done a neat idea. And then Tom won the coin flip. So Tom won the painting award for that year for favorite army.
Yeah.
And like, that's a really cool outcome when you're doing this kind of like low stakes, low bar thing. Is you can like, that's never going to happen when you're doing paint quality, right? Because the Toms of the world are just never going to be in the conversation, no matter how cool the idea is.
Exactly. You can't win in interesting ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing to talk about in painting contests is like, if subject and composition don't matter, you don't get a Van Gogh.
No.
Right? It's the difference between the masters and the modernists, right? Where you have this thing where Impressionism couldn't technically, if you're doing a painting contest of like old masters, Impressionism technically couldn't beat the old masters because they are technically more proficient at painting, right? And it's more close to photorealism. Like,
well, at least if you're judging on realism,
that's it. And then you have Chuck Close come along and be like, no, I'm going to do photorealism with pencil.
Yeah,
and then it's a whole other ballgame because like then just Chuck just wins everything, and you don't have any capacity to beat him because he can make a photograph with a pencil. And so like, I do think that's a really valid point is how do you create a rubric for judging these things? And is it, we've hit our time. And
I told you we were going to be able to do it in 30.
You're fine. and then how do we get past that so that more innovative stuff can show up? Because that's where art lives.
Yes.
It's not art actually, if it's just who's the most technically proficient.
A thing I didn't put on my manifesto, but that I think is a cool idea is it would be nice if at the larger events, if there was like, you split the prize in half. Here's the execution prize and here's the cool idea prize. Yeah. And the cool idea prize can be essentially execution agnostic, but literally just like someone who had a cool idea, committed to the bit and finished it. And it's awesome.
Yeah.
And even the people who are in the above average, or maybe even if it's cool enough, the people in the basics category can still compete for that.
Or it can blend.
Because then more people are involved.
It can also blend both.
Exactly.
And I think that's where like the real magic is, because I'll be honest, a beautifully painted miniature, I appreciate the technical skill of a beautifully painted miniature, but if it's a stock miniature on a stock base with nothing additional to it, I look at it and I feel nothing.
Yeah.
I don't feel anything, and I can look at it and be like, that's nice. But for the most part, I go like, yeah, cool. Like it doesn't mean anything to me anymore at all. Whereas if there's a theme or a gimmick or a cool base, or even just like that, you take the time in composition to take two stock miniatures and base them in such a way that it looks like they're fighting because you picked the correct miniatures and you composed them properly. That's the difference all of a sudden between art and just a really nice paint job. Yeah. And a really nice paint job, I'll be honest, does not do anything for me at all.
But it has its audience. I also agree. I'm more on the concept side. But like, again, I'm not disparaging the people. Like I said, there's different ways. There's different kinds of art you can do, and they're all cool.
The contest rubric running towards one thing is what I think is where we're leading here.
So, okay. So that's essentially just to talk about, like, I think most painting prizes that could ever be given out in the world for example, Infinity would be this type of thing. They're just like, get your people to paint their models, and then maybe a minor community thing to get some acknowledgement of the people who did a better job. But I think that's where that stuff belongs. So fine art prizes, the quality judging, belong at bigger events where there's enough competition. And so you need big attendance to have enough people in attendance with armies of the correct, the necessary paint quality to actually, for there to be a question about who's going to win. Because again, if you know who's going to win, you're not really having a contest. So you need enough volume, you need a critical mass of people. And there just aren't that many of those, right? There's how many 50-person Infinity events are there? Half a dozen in the States?
If you count the Krug, which is like double sized, it's like over 100, then that's Atlanta. Yeah. Adepticon.
Around that neighborhood, right?
I don't know if LVO's hit 50 yet, but something like that, yeah.
But yeah, so if we say, and again, invented numbers, but if we say that 50 is the number of people you need to have enough people to have a meaningful paint competition, that means there can be a maximum of 6 of these events in the United States every year.
Sure.
And so because there's so few events where that type of judging is possible, these types of paint events are almost as important to the Spuds of the world as the satellite part of the event is to the Owens of the world.
Right.
Like Owen travels to go to these events because he wants to win, because he wants an opportunity. Like it is more meaningful to beat 50 people than it is to beat 8 people.
Well, I think it's more meaningful to play 5 games in an event, because then he knows he's getting to play people that could win 5 games.
Yeah, he didn't just fluke into weird matchups.
That's it. Yeah. And it's funny because Owen weirdly values, I'm just going to speak for him. He weirdly values the quality of the game more than anything else. So like, did I have a hard time playing it? Then that, like, the trophy doesn't mean anything if he didn't have a hard time playing, and he'll doubt the legitimacy of his own trophy.
Right.
If he didn't like really struggle at the end. That's why I think he loved Carbonite, because he was fighting for his life at the end and had to make a completely weird play to his ice play at the end to pull it off. And he didn't even win. He drew. He just fought for a draw. He totally Kobayashi Maru'd at the end. Had to reprogram the simulation to not immediately die. And like that, I think that to him means more. Because like you said, the sample group's bigger. So like to get through to that point, you're playing good players by the end.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, if you go to an 8-person event, when Owen shows up to our locals, and when he lived here, he did. And hey, surprise, he won. But it's like, that's a less meaningful achievement for him. Because like, we are not meaningful competition for Owen.
Some people are. But very often no. Very often no.
Okay. So these events are as important to us on the hobby side as they are to the competitive. So like, they are important events. And again, the people running them know that, right? They run the hobby side of the event and they take it seriously, right? Like at Adepticon, for the singles, for example, it's a 2-day event. At lunch on the first day, you display your armies, and then they go around and they do kind of a gut check, and they're like, what are the high quality ones here? And then they basically cut to the 5 finals, and then they're like, okay, you guys are the finalists. Tomorrow at lunch, you're going to set them up again, but all together. And then the panel of judges are going to go around and look at them, really scrutinize them from up close, and really try to make the tough decisions between. And I think that's a fantastic way to do it. I think like 90% of the way that they do this at Adepticon is exactly how they should be doing it. I really only have like a slight note for the very end of the process. And so, yeah, I think overall, I love you guys. You're good people.
And I think that's a great way of handling, like when you get to scale, because we keep using Infinity as a reference, but I want to talk about other games too.
Well,
if there's 200 people in a tournament, like any of the 40K events, then how you need to do it that way.
And I have some notes about that in the next
break
section.
it almost into heats and like have pods of 50.
And you need a rubric.
And then you need a rubric,
which we'll get to.
Yeah.
So, okay. So these are really important events, and it's the only one I go to. And so now that I've felt a little bit bad about the way that one of them ended, because it was the same person over and over again, I now have 0 events that I'm planning to do big work for, and I'm sad about that. I'm sure I will recover. I'm sure I'll find something else, but like, or I'll just forgive them and I'll try again for this. But like right now in the moment, I don't feel great, and that's it, because there aren't that many of these. I feel bad. So, okay. Spud would love for it to be treated a bit more formally and for more thought to go into how they're run. Great. All right. So finally, last major section, but it has multiple subsections. Great. So since I am a human being, and all human beings know that if they were in charge, they would make the right decisions. And as a human being, I also would make the right decisions if I was in charge. So here are the correct decisions I would make if I was running a paint event. So
this is where the manifesto part of the manifesto comes in, where he tells you what it would be like if he was the president.
This is good. This is great, everybody. This is the part you tuned in for.
Nothing could possibly go wrong now. Everybody
40 minutes in, we get to the part you came for. All right. So, if you are going to run a contest for a subjective activity like painting, I think that it is important for the organizers to clearly in advance set what the expectations are for the judging.
Yes.
I work at a college. There's an evaluation policy in my college that says that not only does the instructor need to say, here's what I want you to do for assignment 3, but you're also supposed to come up with a rubric of here is how I am going to grade assignment 3. I'm going to give 3 points for this, 10 points for this, and then that gets published in advance. And that's super important, because if you're the student doing assignment 3, you could follow the instructions, but misunderstand where the emphasis is supposed to be. And sometimes when you look at the rubric, you're like, oh, wow, 10 points for this section. I was not planning to put that much work into that now, but now I know that that is important. So like and my argument here isn't rubrics for everything, but like, I'm just saying that like having an expectation, having the judges set down what are our priorities, and we'll get to that in just a second, and like how are we going to implement those priorities is actually something that the people entering into the contest may want to change their work around.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's the version of like, if you're judging on how somebody builds a house, you don't care how they cut down the trees.
Yeah.
But
you do need to know the building code.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly,
That's why the building code is public and everybody's allowed to see it because you need to know what rules you're supposed to be following. It's not fair for the building inspector to show up and say, surprise, you had no idea, but we're not
smoke alarms nowhere. What?
Okay. So, you should be, so first of all, you need to just have an internal conversation with, if it's in you yourself in your head, if you're doing it alone, or ideally a panel of people, if you're going to be doing these larger events, I'm assuming will usually be run by a panel of people and they should be having a conversation. And so you need to decide internally first, what do we want to value? Because it turns out there's some value judgments you're going to end up having to make here. You're going to have to take positions on certain things that you may not have thought about the fact that you need to take a position on. So there's some obvious stuff that you're just going to always include, right? The quality of the paint, right? Like, are they clean? Is the color scheme interesting? Did they blend? Is everything, did they do freehand? There's some obvious things that are generally going to be assumed to be included in any of these hobby things. And I think that those factors are always there, but you should probably write them down. And there are some areas of this where you can make some unintuitive choices and some controversial choices. The example I'll give here was I was talking to Jay from Lords of War about the rubric that they were using for the Warhammer event this year. I think he was doing Sigmar, was it what he was playing in? And the rubric for that one, the way that one is phrased is it's like all models converted, yes or no. All models, edge highlighted, this many points.
It's kind of effort based. It's like to get a 5,
right?
You've gone super above and beyond. You've converted every miniature. You've highlighted everything to the edges.
Yeah.
You've done basic shading. You've done basic block painting. You've based and painted your models. So a 1 is tabletop. And then to get to 5, it's like how much additional effort went to every single miniature.
Yeah. Right? And so most of the rubric, the way he was explaining it, was like you read it and you're like, yeah, of course. But there were some choices on there. Like one of the choices was to get top points in two of he said it was in 2 different sections. To get top points in 2 of the sections, you have to be doing non-metallic metal. Non-metallic metal is very nice and it's very impressive and takes a lot of skill, but it's not better. It's not intrinsically better than metallics.
It's also like kind of an older paint style people don't
do exactly. That's not right. And it's like
it was a fad in
it is a style. It is a choice that an artist could make, is that I think this will look better with non-metallic metal, or I think my skills with non-metallic metal are better. But if a person is really good at true metallic metal or some other technique, that should not be penalized, but okay, fine.
Well, it's like you're forcing a style choice as a way that you're
exactly. And so, but so ideally don't do that. But if you are going to do it, fine. That's a position you can take as the person running the event. But it does need to be, you need to let people know.
Yeah.
If you are favoring one technique or one style over another, people need to know that. Because if I'm planning to win this event and I don't normally do non-metallic metal, well, I need to know that so I can change my plans about how I'm painting my army.
A weird place too. Though, imagine you come down and there's a clearly better painted army than another army, but one's non-metallic metal and one isn't. But then they give the points to the clearly better painted army that isn't non-metallic
exactly.
metal.
And then
non-metallic metal goes like, I got my rubric, and why did this guy beat me? That guy didn't get that point. Why did that guy
do what he was supposed to do? Why is
You're
he winning?
Painting yourself into a corner all of a sudden with those kinds of weird. So you gotta be careful with your rubrics.
Yeah, like I said, deciding what you're going to care about. Like as you can see, there are decisions to be made.
Yeah.
Okay. But then you might have some side criteria, and I'm going to list the side criteria and then I'm going to discuss them. So like side criteria might be things like conversions or scratch sculpts or a theme display, or like depending on the event, paraphernalia. Like, did we wear team shirts? Did we make hats? Did we have a banner? Like, these are definitely a side thing, but if you're doing it's
like a presentation score.
Exactly. Like it's not the army and it's not even the display, but it does help theme, and you could make a decision that is maybe a small part, or you could make a decision that that's irrelevant. But either way, you should probably make that decision. You should probably make that if the person spends 4 months and they make a Eurovision song about their army. Does that count?
I was actually in a discussion where someone was talking about their Infinity Army, where when they were playing, they had a little LED screen with the app, the Play app on a phone. But then all of the miniatures were magnetized to the back of their arms, so they would deploy them like they were like little holograms, and they're all lit up from underneath. So it was like the God hand, and it would break off and you had to play your miniatures. And I was like, you're out of your fucking mind. That's too much work. I don't want to do that, but you should do that because that sounds really cool. And they were like freaking out about how they're going to 3D print this like Nintendo Power Glove with like all the play shit. I was like, absolutely. I would stroke out just thinking about that, but that sounds amazing. But that's a thing. Like, but imagine that is what you're now the painting contest guy scoring.
Well, exactly.
It's like, how do I go look at your army? We got to look at my arm. This peregrine falcon attached to my arm.
The only way to display it is for me to be there with my arm
out, right? Like, and does that not count?
Yeah, and, and so like,
is that
these are weird questions. These are weird things to think about. And some of these things may not make it necessarily into the public document, whether or not you're awarding points or ignoring banners or awarding points or ignoring weird display. Like, that may not be something you want to publicize because maybe it's not even going to come up. But it's something you should at least have a conversation about. Like, if we see someone go like way the hell out there with something that's totally ancillary and doesn't really influence, do we want to give them bonus points anyway because they tried and there's effort on display, or do we want to say no, we want to keep it about this? Both of those are positions you can
take. It like a creative slush fund basically that you can then be free to assign, because that feels like it has value. And in art,
there are things that are cool to see.
Right? Well, in art, that's the pushing the boundaries of what art is, right?
So these are decisions where like people who decide, like, and it's really funny because the people who are running these events, they are not people who signed up for like, I would like to be an art judge. They are a person who's like, hey, a tournament needs to happen. I'm the tournament runner in my area. I guess I'm doing this. They signed up to run a tournament. And then the expectation on the side is, well, okay, I'm going to do the paint judging. And now we're asking them to make value judgments about correct art and not correct art. And like, this is weird and unintuitive that you would be asking yourselves these questions. But because of what I hope I outlined, where these are important, and like for those of us who engage on this side, we want this thought to have been put in.
Because if it matters, then it has to be formalized. Otherwise, you're not putting equal weight to it. Yeah. And the people that showed up where that was an important part of the experience, you're just devaluing it for them. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I can skip a section. Then I'm going to say, so you might decide that you're specifically excluding some things because they are irrelevant. So like, if I'm showing up every year with really elaborate displays, but the judges are like, that's not necessarily a fair thing to judge, and we just want it to be about the paint, that is a valid position they can take. They should say that. Like, you like, we encourage people to do that, but it's not going to be part of the thing. Great. That's a judgment you can make, and I know where to put my effort next year. Weird one, and this one is one of the only ones on here that's specifically about the outcome of the Adepticon Infinity. Does judging have memory, right? The person entered Red Nomads last year, and then he won twice with Red Nomads this year. Is that good or bad or neutral, right? You could take any of those three positions. You could say that we want people doing novel work every year, and therefore we will try to remember who won last year or look at the photos who won last year and make sure that they're not just doing the same army again. Because obviously, like, I think we can all probably agree you don't want someone entering literally the same, like the same block of models and winning again.
Oh, again, it doesn't matter. I think in Infinity in particular, too, doesn't matter if the army being put to the painting contest is the one you're playing with. Because like that's a thing that's come kind of twice in the last two big events I've been to. And I think it's a unique problem to Corvus Belli's way of doing things
because of the liberal proxy policy.
But it certainly could be something that the organizers could give like guidelines to and say like, well, and here's the thing is, I think this falls into the same category that Warhammer had to go through, where for a long time there had to be a question of, if you paid someone else to paint your army, can you win the best painted award?
Yeah.
And that was the thing they had to deal with, because so many players in Warhammer would spend $5,000 on getting an army painted and then walk off the paint trophy too. And it's like, how would the judge ever know? Yeah. Like, you have to have thought about that and have something in the rubric to be like, how do we feel about this?
When I won the team event years ago with my Eugene army, one of the three team members was someone who had hired Daviette to paint his army, but he went home and he gave Daviette the medal. Yeah. Like, he was like, hey, you earned this. Here you go.
You won this painting medal. Exactly. But that's a thing that like legitimately happens all the time right now. And it's a real feel bad. Yeah. You have to have thought about that.
I would be curious to know if the painters in that scenario knew that was part of the arrangement, that this is going to be entered in painting, and did they get it?
Would they ever know? Like, why would they? You know, like why? And especially in like local events, like if
I guess in locals, but I would say at a convention, there's a chance they might see. So maybe that's part of the arrangement. Like, I'll give you an extra $500 if you keep your mouth shut that you did this. Whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, and some people it's going to be super obvious, right? Like so it's funny because I think some of these So if you take painting as part of the competitive part of a tournament, because we're not talking about it separately as its own thing, and I want to remind everybody of that. We're not talking about it as its own separate. This is just a painting contest.
Yeah, this is not Golden Demon. This is not Crystal Brush. This is like I entered a tournament and they picked the best army, the nicest looking army in the tournament.
There's a prize for painting inside of a tournament, and painting matters in a tournament. It's a whole. That's a whole like. Well, we have to think about these things because they can happen. And how is that other guy who spent 7 months painting an army going to feel if a dude who got his army commission painted beautifully enters it, plays games, the models aren't even reflective of what's on the table, and then wins.
It gets even muddier.
And that's it
gets even muddier because it's possible the person who won the event wasn't doing that on purpose. He's like, I painted them because I wanted nice models, and I showed up for the event, and the people just handed me a trophy. Like I didn't like. Is there an like? Does they have to recuse himself? Does he have to say, "Oh, I didn't. Please don't. I don't like. I don't know. I doubt that there's a rule. Maybe there is now after the controversy, but like anyway. Okay, so does it have memory? Okay. Okay, so keep in mind, big event army judging isn't. I'm calling it the fine art, but it's not really fine art. Again, it's really what we just talked about. So when you're setting your expectations, you definitely don't phrase them as requirements, please. But like when you're setting your guidelines of here's the things we're going to be looking at, keep it realistic. Like if this is not the first time that you ran the event, think about last year's army. What was the 10% or the 15% bar for the top of the armies, and kind of set your guidelines for what you saw. If you're running a hundreds of person event, you might have actually seen nearly display quality, and maybe those can be your guidelines if that's what we're looking for. But if it was a 25 or 30 person event, then you can set like, oh, the painting should be clean, and we're probably looking for blending, and we're probably looking for freehand, and you can maybe stop there and then leave the rest of them up to what they want to do. So keep your expectations realistic. And then finally, how will judging work? So this I think depends a lot on just the scale of it. So the main thing is like, is it one judge or a panel? And I think that's largely just about how many people are running the event.
How big the event is.
Right. I mean, I imagine most of the people running the tournament side are probably going to at least walk over and be part of the conversation. I imagine. But yeah, for smaller events, and then the next part is like, how do you actually conduct it? So like for a really small event, yeah, probably just the judges walking around one time and looking at them. They will remember by the time they get to Army 20, which one was the nice one or the two nice ones, and they can have the conversation, and that's fine. For like a medium event, and I'll put Adepticon as a medium event, like the biggest Infinity events, I would still put as a medium size event. I like the system they do, where they do a pass to determine the finalists, and then they cluster the finalists, and then they judge them there. I think that's actually a fantastic system. It's the right way to do it. For really huge events, the hundreds of players Warhammer 40k events, this is where you need a rubric. You need a rubric because probably you're not going to have every judge look at every army. You need to divide that labor. And so first of all, you need to make sure that there's consistent judging from one to the next. And the only way you're going to do that is if they all have the same rubric that says
standards.
And as much as it does kind of suck that you have to write all this stuff out and like, I got penalized for this, but there's no other way. There's no other way for it to be fair. And the other reason why it's really important to have the rubric is if I'm a judge and like if there's 800 people and I'm one of 8 judges and we're each going to look at 100 armies, by the time I get to Army 100, I'm not going to remember what Army 32 looked like.
Yeah.
I have to be grading them at the time I'm looking at them, or the information is going to blur. And then at the end, you can cut to the people who got, I mean, it was funny when Jay was describing, they cut to the 100%. And I was like, yeah, I guess with that many people, you're cutting to the 100% and then doing your subjective analysis. So you have to think about how that's going to be done. And then now this is all just internal conversation. You've decided your priorities for your painting event. Now you're deciding how you're prioritizing them. If it's a small event, and again, a smaller medium event, like, Adepticon is a medium, Adepticon Infinity is a medium size event, a paragraph, when you're doing you're publishing your army pack ahead of time, or you're publishing this thing, hey, we're going to be judging painting. We're going to be looking for the following criteria. These are kind of our must-haves. And like bonuses that might help in your favor would be like a themed base, conversions, whatever. Like you don't need to go into a lot of detail. Just some kind of a paragraph that gives some kind of an idea what your priorities are and what the things are. Where like if I am striving for this, what are some things I could do to put myself over the edge? Yeah. Giving people that information is really, really valuable. And you need to give it far enough ahead of time that people can do something with the information. Publishing that a week ahead of time is not helpful. It needs to be months. But fortunately, like for something like Adepticon, the event descriptions are up months ahead of time.
The registration's months
you just
ahead.
need to spend the time and put that into the initial event listing. I think and I did double check. That was not in the ones this year. But like again, I don't think that I think the only crime that was committed here at Adepticon was just that they just didn't think, they did not understand how much a person like me cares about this.
Well,
like,
also,
that's it. That's it. That's the only thing that was done
here. Think about
the
fact that most larger events for Infinity and for, let's say, even probably War Machine back in the day and stuff, they would have had a painting award foisted on them by Adepticon.
Yeah.
They wouldn't normally run a painting award at all. And so the fact that medal shows up and they're like, you have to do something with this, and they go like, because like the Corvus Belli organized play pack doesn't have shit about painting it.
No, it doesn't.
There's no, and weirdly for a company who prides itself on beautiful displays, and which made Angel Guerrillas or whatever Geraldes famous for these, non-metal metallics. It's a very European way of painting, a very Perrier stock car way of painting. Ricky Bobby. I don't know why that just came to my head, that it's the whatchamacallit, it's the Ricky Bobby versus the Perrier stock car, the Old Spice versus Perrier. That if there's no help in what you're used to and you're freestyling it, then this can happen. This kind of like thing can take place, especially when you're required to do painting.
So you need to publicize it. If you are a big event, and this is the 40Ks, you need to publish your rubric. Like that actually, and they do for detail years. Needs to be in.
And they have for years.
But literally, like if you're only a medium or you are small, you're doing this at your local store at your annual, a rubric, I think, is actively harmful because you're getting way too prescriptive, and there's actually very unlikely that more than one or two people in your store even paint the way you're imagining. Right?
It's all volunteer.
You need to anyway. You only need the detail at the extreme end, and most people, a detailed rubric is just not even. It's not only not helpful, it's actively harmful to the process.
Yeah, I think at the level that we organized at. Yeah. It was encourage people just to get over the line.
Yeah, we were never
with the sweeties and prizes, basically.
Exactly.
And then when you get to the higher end, the medium to large size tournaments, that's where you start being like, okay, now we need to actually sort you guys out and make this possible for us to judge and give you guys the guidelines that we're doing. So you feel good about it afterwards. So the ones who do care, because like you said, 80% of people will not care.
No, exactly.
But the 20% that do, it's just as important for them.
It's why I went to the event. I go to Adepticon to do this. This is my win the satellite. It's let's show up with my thing and try to beat the other painters.
Try to be something cool.
Yeah. Okay. Last section of the manifesto.
You have 6.5 minutes left.
Great. We can do it. Consider the optics when you're picking winners.
Double time,
So the awarding of these prizes has PR implications. I'm sorry, but it does. Who you pick, people notice it, and they draw dots between your choices. I know that sucks. That's not what anyone signed up for. They're not trying to necessarily, but it's part of it. People are going to pay attention to your choices. Maybe not a lot of people. Maybe there's only a handful of people like me meticulously looking at this. But so, for example, if you award the same person over and over, or the same army over and over, like the judge just likes Yujing, right? And that Yujing keeps winning, right? That's a data point. That's data points that get connected together. Or if there's a gimmick over and over, like again, like in the alternate universe where I keep showing up with these bizarre displays, but less well-painted models, if they were to keep awarding me a prize, that would be problematic. That would be like, that sets an expectation. People are going to look at that and say like, oh, that's what you need to do. Actually, literally someone said that. I didn't hear it, but I think it was Tom or Scott overheard this. They were like, oh yeah, we heard someone there was these two friends, they were looking at your church display and they were like, oh, so you need LEDs to win now?
Wow.
And like,
else you didn't
that is a very valid point. Like there is a political decision, there's a consideration in mind on the person judging the paint. Like, do we want to award a prize to someone who's going to now establish a precedent that the following thing is mandatory? Yeah. We never said it was mandatory, but people are going to perceive that certain things are, we have to do that now. Right? That's part of it. And like, if a less well-painted army wins because of a gimmick, is that good or is that bad? Tom had a less well-painted army than Dave yet, and he won our local fan choice award. Is that good or that bad? At a local event, I would say that's fantastic. At a bigger event, you could make an argument that isn't good, that we are actually trying to do the refinement. And like, both of those are valid positions you could make that have all kinds of different contexts that would make one the decision sometimes and another one the other time. But it's something you should think about. Should a cool idea be enough to elevate your score above people who'd had better execution and craftsmanship? There's no right answer to that question.
It's funny because it's diorama rama. Does Ralph win because he's got a bunch of he's got Chewbacca still in packaging, or because Lisa wins because she's got the Telltale Heart made out of Malibu Stacy dolls, right? Like there's a thing there where I do think that that's where the rubric becomes important, because big and showy can still just be averagely and poorly painted, and then it doesn't actually get you over the line. Whereas big and showy, but it's all meticulously highlighted and perfect and stuff.
It can be points in your favor, and you can make a decision
It's a slush
that you want
fund,
it to
it's
be
not the
just about
thing.
the craftsmanship, and you want to ignore that stuff, and that is a valid position to take. And you can take the opposite position that no, we want people doing cool stuff, and we're going to consider it. They're both valid positions. Take whichever one you feel is right, but let people know. That it just needs to be a known part of it. In this competition, that either this part does or does not matter, and you kind of make that on a bunch of different factors.
Yeah.
That's basically, I already said that. Okay, so fine. That's basically it. So essentially, I'm done with I'm putting my pieces of paper down.
Okay.
I had not a great experience overall. I loved going to Adepticon. I love talking to all the people there. I love all the human beings who run it. You're wonderful people. And I do think that they do take it seriously, and they do work, and they do try to, like I said, they're not people who signed up to do a paint competition, but they're doing their damnedest to do that job really, really well. I do just think that some of these pre-conversations might have been beneficial. I just look at it as like, what I don't know their internal processes. I'm not part of the paint judging team at Adepticon, but I can just look at the outcomes, and the outcome of one person getting 4 of the 6 awards that to me is not a good outcome, because I think that it should be a good outcome to send more people home proud, and to tell people that more kinds of work are valid and appreciated and able to be applied.
I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to tell you what I just learned.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you the learning I got from your manifesto.
Okay.
So, and this would be my 2 cents on this same topic, is that when you are a company running high profile events, and we already kind of established in your manifesto that this is at the community level, that people are volunteering and running events in stores, which is incredibly important. You need to
you can't have the higher kind without the first
that's
kind.
Right.
It's the feeder system into the
exactly.
other one.
You need to make it as inclusive as possible, and painting is at your own leisure, at your own will. We encourage you to do it with sweeties and prizes, kind of a thing. And you and I have done that in our community building forever. At the level at which it is now a spectacle, and when you're at a big con, every one of these companies wants their tournaments to be a spectacle, because people are wandering from thing to thing.
You want the sidewalk appeal. You want that
curb
walk
appeal.
over.
Exactly.
What game is this?
You want that curb appeal. You do have to take it a little bit more seriously than just we'll walk around and judge it. And there needs to be a little more transparency on how it's going to be judged. And the reason for that is the people that are doing the work to really try and have like a cool thing to show off.
We hate each
when
other.
they go to these conventions. They don't hate each other, but they're actually the most valuable to the event organizer, right? They're most valuable to promoting more people to want to come and try and be included in that next year. They're the ones that their stuff gets photographed and put online, and people go, look at how great and prestigious and cool this event is.
Yeah, I guess.
And so when you talk about optics, I don't mean like the political optics of did or didn't they do a good decision, but if the purpose of events, outside of just determining who the winners and losers are, which is the point, is also the spectacle in the community, that for a company encourages people to come back, buy more stuff year in, year out, go back to their little community and get them all excited about it, so they can keep growing that little pond of tadpoles to be of a sort of like a committed group of gamers that'll have a good time together, then it does matter. And it seems small in comparison to, did we play by the rules? Did we win or lose? But from the, like you said, the curb appeal point of view, that is, I think, invaluable. And if you just do a little bit to take it seriously, then everybody can go and walk away from it, because the having different people show up with different things every year, and also the weirder your game is about models, the more important I think it is for you to have some kind, for the organizers at least, to have some kind of say in it. Because then weird shit like this doesn't happen. We don't get the proxy culture thing. We don't get the war machine thing. We don't get the, like, remember when they showed up the best painted war machine every 1 year at Adepticon, and a bunch of the models were broken? Like the wings were like snapped off in the photo. And it was like, oh yeah, it was really bad. Oh, it's Owen's favorite thing. I think he still has it on his phone, where it's like, here's the best painted Legion of Overplayed armor. It's like a wing broken off and like 2 arms snapped off. And Owen's like, they couldn't even put it together. Like they couldn't even glue them back together before they took a photograph. This is so sad. It was because people didn't care. But the optics of that, like, what does it look like? Well, and here's the thing, nobody gets paid when you play a game of anything. they only get paid when you buy miniatures. So from a company's point of view, the miniatures have to matter. And that means that just putting a little bit of forethought into it, I think can pay off in a huge way that it wouldn't otherwise. So I'm sorry that your experience has been mixed. You should start playing Warhammer where they have a rubric. You start playing Warhammer again. Or play War Machine. I got a Horde starter stuff in the other room. You can play some War Machine again.
I like playing War Machine.
Come back to War Machine. We'll play War Machine again. This is it.
Is War Machine?
I heard Mark IV is good again. Yeah.
Oh, great.
It's all plastic miniatures.
I still have all my old models. I'll just not buy anything new. And
you can't know they got rid of them all. The Age of War Machine at all. Yeah, the Age of Cataclysm. Cool. It's all legacy. It's all, you can't play. You have to throw those in the garbage. You're not allowed to play until you throw them in the garbage, though. Unless they're converted, because you can just convert new ones. Sculpt your own War Machine army. The rules are free. Yeah. You don't have to buy miniatures from them. Just sculpt them all. Let's do it. Let's play War Machine, but let's only sculpt our own miniatures.
Great.
Yeah, we solved it. We did it. All right. So there we go. We finished another Inside Tabletop.
Eventually.
Thank you so much for coming with your manifesto. We did a double episode. This is like 2 episodes in one. So I hope you guys get twice the content out of this. And let us know in the comments what you guys think about painting competitions inside tournaments, because that's what we're talking about here. Not standalone painting competitions, but painting as part of a tournament. And it's funny because we didn't even touch on whether or not it's part of your tournament score, which I don't think it should be. And I think we handled really well inside the Infinity community, where it's like, it's just its own separate thing.
Yeah, I think that I do also think it belongs on the side. I think mixing them together is just a strange decision. And I know that was what GW
They're just parallel. Yeah, they're just making them parallel.
They're just separate. They're just separate things because they're separate fields of endeavor. And like, yeah, if you want to give an overall, because I think that was what GW used to do, is they were like, you are the best overall winner versus best general.
The best general, best sportsman, best overall. And I'm fine with that.
Fine if you want to do that as a separate track, but like it shouldn't be part of the only track.
Yeah, the tournament has a winner, the painting has a winner. Maybe there's like a fan favorite like person. And there's even other ways we didn't talk about. Like you can have a fan favorite versus a judges award for painting contests too. Like that's a whole other way of handling it we didn't even talk about, where it's like you have the favorite of everybody who played in the tournament, and then you have the judges pick a technically nicely painted one too. And very often the fan favorite is the bigger prize because it's like a popularity contest. It's actually a vote, you know what I mean? And those are other ways of handling it. So tell us in the comments what you think your like experience with this has been. Do you give a shit about it? Do you not give a shit about it? Where do you fall in Spud's pie chart of like human behavior in this stuff, which is a very rough guess based on his 25.
The numbers are fake. Experience. I invented them.
That's right. What was that game where the rules don't matter and the numbers are made up?
Whose line is it anyway?
Whose line is it anyway? That's right. The rules don't matter and the numbers are made up. So, tell us what you think and in what game you play and how it gets handled. I'd be interested to hear what from different kinds of gamers, because obviously we just talked about the one that was just relevant to our current conversation, which is Infinity, and which has weird relationships between miniatures and results and stuff too. And then 40K, which is obviously the 600-pound Guerrilla, right? Because it's the one that you can see most prevalently in how they handle it. But tell us what your game thinks. Like, does BattleTech give a shit about painting?
Hey, as long as people are posting that stuff, I'll crowdsource this one. Are any of these ever like run by the company versus just like are there any games out there where the company is saying, like, because you were saying like ITS has no guidance about how to do a paint contest? Does that exist? Does anyone do that? I would be fascinated to know the answer if that's actually happening out there.
It's in no rule books. Yeah. I don't even think the WYSIWYG rule, the what you see is what you get rule, exists in 40K anymore.
I don't think.
And that used to be a rule. It used to be like a what you see is what you get rule. I don't think that even exists. I don't even know if that's even in there anymore, because you can't customize your miniatures anymore.
Sure.
It's all just a thing is a thing is a thing. So like the what you see is what you get doesn't matter as long as you say this is this guy, right? So it's a bit more infinity in that regard. But I'll be interested to hear. So tell us what you guys have had as your experience in the comments. What you think about Spud's manifesto. Maybe a stripped down version of this will appear in the comments. If Spud decides he's going to go add it in comments later on.
Clean it up.
Yeah, that's right. Got to take all the real names out. All the addresses, all the doxing has to come out. All the addresses and real names. But we'll be back with more of these next week. Till Ash.